Over the past few years and the various podcasts we've done, we realized that some of the best conversations we've ever had never made it to one of our shows. They were either calls where we were trying to get to know somebody, or just conversations we had before or after we actually recorded an episode. So we decided to do a little experiment. We're just recording some conversations, and if they're good ones, they're going to turn into podcast episodes. If not, you're never going to see them. This next one was an incredible conversation I had with my friend Ian Smith. Ian is the founder of the Portfolio Partnership, where he's helped companies all over the world position themselves to be attractive to buyers. He's worked in mergers and acquisitions. He's been an investment banker. His experience is just amazing. And he's the author of 2 incredible books, The Acquirer's Playbook and Fulfilling the Potential of Your Business, Big Company Thinking for the Mighty Small Business. Let's get into it with Ian. Ian, the last time we talked, you were talking about how difficult it is for private companies to make, shall we say, graceful exits.
Right.
And I know I want to focus on the human side, but I think probably you should talk a little bit about the technical side too, because I think in this case, probably more than any, the two are knit together. And the reason I'm saying that is because you've talked about this. A lot of emotion when we're exiting, creating a company exit, whether that's something that's forced on us or something we're choosing to do because it's a sale, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we both in different ways have been up close to this entrepreneurship thing for quite a while, and AI and other.
Because we couldn't get jobs.
Exactly.
Nobody would hire me. I had to work for myself.
Yes. You went well, but apparently not.
Yeah, right. I know it.
That's right. But yeah, exactly. We're up close to this either because we're on a payroll up close to, or in the last 15, 16 years on my own payroll, as it were, helping entrepreneurs. It's a fascinating subject, and it's the whole exit process. There's so many myths around this subject that it's a delight to talk about it, because if that bursts a bubble, then that's great. People learn from like that. And I can tell you that there are really some fallacies and some strange things. One of the basic things is, and this is almost bringing humor to it as well, I'll say to an entrepreneur, as an example, and let's call him Jim.
Why not? Yeah, okay.
I mean, it just came to me there. I don't know why. And you say to Jim, so Jim, would you buy your own company? He'd say, hell no.
Well, I'm not a good example. It's hard to sell a one pony operation.
Frank, Bill, it doesn't really matter. And I'm not even an inch from the truth. I am telling the truth. They're like, oh God, no way. Oh, okay. And so why would that be? Well, I'm the main sales guy. I build the product, and you sort of you start touching on this kind of almost a myth that I'll build a business and one day I'll sell it. Well, the reality is the data doesn't really back you up. It's such a building a business that's transferable can be, in fact, it's the best way of building a business. It's more fun and you make more money. And people think, what's that all about? So when I talk about scaling a company, I talk about scaling it with a buyer in mind, not a buyer, but buyers generally in mind of what they cherish. And what they cherish are actually things that will make your business more sustainable and more and less risky. And so and safer. And people are like, okay, tell me more, because I like.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just going to say. And particularly, you struck a nerve, because one of the challenges that we find a lot of times when we're doing it, like doing workshops or whatnot, is that people sometimes don't. They have difficulty making, for instance, culture a tangible item. And I know it doesn't show up on the balance sheet or anything, but to me, it seems like that's one of the most valuable things. One of the things that makes a company so valuable, right? Especially if you're trying to sell it. Who wants to buy someplace with a broken culture?
Well, in fact, people do. I totally agree. In codifying that, Jim, I've got a list that I've built up over decades, and I've played around with it and tweaked it, but it's basically the same list, which is there's 15 criteria in five buckets, I suppose, really,
Mm-hmm.
but 15 criteria that buyers I know in my experience have cherished over the years, cherished to the point where if you don't have a high score in some of these attributes, it's not a discount discussion, it's a walk away discussion because
Oh yeah.
I don't want to buy a problem. One of
Mm.
them is culture in the sense of you know, company culture, is staff morale and employee engagement high? Like
Yeah.
that, a version of that is much more measurable these days. Now, in the first coffee meeting with a seller, a buyer's not going to be able to smell that out or get that. But over a succession of meetings and documents, a good sort of smart acquirer can smell what that morale and that engagement is really like. There's all sorts of ways of tracking that and testing that. Sometimes you can see it in the mindset of even the sellers themselves in the meetings, and so that is like so the issue therefore is why wouldn't you want your staff morale and engagement and those kind of things to be high even if you never sell the business? Like why wouldn't you want that for
No,
yourself?
well, Alfie, right? I mean, it's one of the key
Right?
metrics for performance, although it's
Yeah.
hard to convince some people. But the other thing, when you said that, do buyers? What surprises me, and I know it happens in business, it happens in real estate. So I mean, we
Mhm.
can kind of broaden the conversation. But this
Yeah.
idea of buying things sight unseen seems to be more prevalent than it ever has been, especially when people have cash to burn, or companies have
Yeah.
cash to burn. Aren't they
Yeah.
walking the floor? Because real quick story. I mean, one of the metrics I use when I'm hired by a company is I want to walk the floor. I want to see and people think I'm kind of spying, but I'm not. The key thing that
No.
I'm looking for is the reaction because a lot of times
Right.
when I'm walking the floor, my
Yeah.
guides are C-suite executives, maybe even the CEO, right? How are
Right.
people
Right.
reacting? And the
Yeah.
best companies are the ones where nothing changes. You know, they just,
Yeah.
hey Bob, how you? If they're taking a break, they keep taking a break. They don't hustle to
It,
cover up. You know, the worst
it's a
companies are the ones where everybody scrambles because the boss is around, right?
it's a super point. I was, as you know, a recovering investment banker, which I did for 14 hard years in London, and then I escaped.
Well,
And I
is that how you substitute Guinness for that? Is that a good substitute
that's
for a
yes,
good a bridge drug to lower?
I'm a recovering accountant, recovering I'm a recovering lots of things actually.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm actually seeing the light now more than ever. And it was interesting when I was in operations before banking at Thomson Reuters as a young boy, learning the ropes really. I hankered over that as an investment banker because I couldn't really fix things as a banker. I just had to
Mm.
sell, like or buy them. Like I couldn't creep across the line and say to the finance director or the COO, "Hey, there's a better way of doing this. Like I know a better way." My boss would say, "Hey, sunshine, if we don't pay you to fix things, we
I
say."
was going to say that knowing you probably tried.
I thought, yes, so, in more than one occasion.
Yeah.
But the point being that when I used to say to clients, for prospects, or clients rather, is we run the business, maybe sell a business, they'd say, "Well, you've
Mm.
seen dozens of these before, Ian, right?" I said, "No, no, 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 no. I'll be walking the floor. I mean, that would be the first thing I do. And you'll have a cover story. I'm not the seller of the business job title, clearly. There is Ian
Yeah.
walking around the floor. Because as you say, you when you get good at this as well and you walk a floor, you see things with your ears. You know what I mean? You see things that other people don't see. It could be dusty racks. It could be the way
Mm.
people greet you. It could be the politeness of people around the reception area, how people are interacting. There's a million ways that AI can't help you with that only a
Yeah.
human can help you with. You know what I mean? So I think that when one is building a great business, you might think you're building it to be transferable, but you really do. This is the jugular point. You really do have to walk around the other side and look at it through the lens of a buyer, and that will open up a whole bunch of thoughts that would be very helpful to know
Hmm.
whether you ever sell it, ever sell it. That's the point. It's a
Yeah.
you know what I mean. It's just a healthy thing to do, and say, well, look, what would that do for me, Ian? Well, maybe you would focus maybe on the concentration of the four customers that keep giving you business. Maybe it should be, maybe they shouldn't own 40% of your revenue last year. Maybe that's a little bit risky. What
Mm.
could go wrong? Well, one of them could
Yeah.
fire you. That kind of thinking, you may say, well, I think it that way anyway. I'm not so sure people
Yeah.
really, you know what I mean? It's like,
No, I know exactly. I mean, and as a micro entrepreneur, we fall into that trap several times.
yeah,
I mean,
oh,
because it's interesting because working on the new book, the only certainty, that's one of the certainty traps, right? Something
right,
happened before, so we expect it to happen again, especially when there's a lot of enthusiasm. And how much does that play a part? Because
right,
some right, both the buyer and the seller can be very enthusiastic. There's the emotion
right,
creeping in again, right? For whatever reason, it might not have anything to do with what you're
right.
putting together as far as the deal
Yeah.
goes.
Yes, I mean, so we're doing quite a bit of work. There's a phenomenon that's coming through now, I believe, and I see it through, say, for example, the Vistage groups that I'm part of, and I see
Mm,
it in forums like that. And that is the world of smaller companies going on the acquisition trail has arrived. There's
mm,
actually smaller companies. Clearly, the headlines like Brad Jacobs doing another $10 billion deal or IBM or something are
yeah.
still there. In fact, mega deals are actually very, very active at the moment. But the $50 million company, even the $10 million company, but certainly revenue wise, or $100 million company, the opportunity to go on the acquisition trail is huge.
Hmm.
It's huge because to go back to your point of enthusiasm, the a business, a guy who's running, or a gal that's running a husband and wife team that are running a $50 million business, and they come across a $5 million business, they understand the pain that the $5 million owner is going through, much more so than a corp dev acquisition director of IBM. Like
Hmm.
they just get no empathy, really. Now, IBM wouldn't buy a $5 million business, well, they might, but it's unlikely. So, in fact, when buyers and sellers come together, especially smaller acquirers, they've got the chance to bond quite quickly on core values because both gone through quite tortuous journeys. And a, a slightly bigger private company would never, ever have the arrogance to say, it's nice meeting you, Jim, and I thought you'd be much bigger. It's like,
Hmm.
sorry, say that. And so the thing about the emotional side of buying and selling is you really have to have a very strong process that allows you to leave the stage when logic suggests you leave the stage, because too many deals are so far down the line that there is a decision not to leave the stage when they really should.
Oh
Because the
yeah,
last,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, we shouldn't really be buying it.
Yeah,
Um,
you just opened a can of worms because there's a lot of pressure to scale. And
yeah,
I think both ways. I've met people who were exploring. We do a lot of work in healthcare, and and credit unions face the same pressure too. There's
yes,
pressure from the side where we want to be part of something bigger, so they merge or sell out to a bigger company. So there's that end of it, right? And
right,
then
right,
and then there's the bigger company most of the time that wants to
yeah,
absorb the smaller ones. It
right,
is how from a leader's perspective, what are the things you should consider if you're thinking about scaling at all? I mean, I know the
yeah,
dollars and cents. I'm not discounting the importance of that, right? But I
right,
think
right, right.
sometimes there's some other questions we got to ask ourselves. Like, am I, as a human being, am I even prepared for this? Is this the right move for me? Is this right?
Yes. Yes, I think the scaling thing is interesting because it depends what business you're in. I mean, if you're in, I don't know, like a headhunting business, and maybe there's four of you in the headhunting business, and you specialize in, I don't know, petrochem, or semiconductor or something. You could be having a very, very nice living, and the last thing you want to do is scale. I mean, the four of you are making
Hmm.
some good money. Maybe there's a couple of research and analysts, and that's just fine. It's not for everyone, and why would you scale? But generally speaking, what scale brings is safety, because a manufacturer in Salem, or whatever, knocking out a great product, it's quite hard without scale to get the margins you really want. And so ultimately, the temptation is to start scaling to at least get some decent procurement. benefits from buying things in bulk, or you attract better staff, and things become a little bit easier. So it is, I see a lot of entrepreneurs, and there's an element of lurching from payroll to payroll because it's tough. Visibility of revenue, to see the next 12 months revenue is tough. And so sometimes, by accelerating your agenda, maybe through acquisitions and maybe through geographic expansion or whatever, you do create a kind of safer vehicle, that the visibility, the order book's greater, you attract better staff. There's a kind of machine starts happening there, but you really, really have to be careful. There's a massive difference between growing and scaling. So growing is your Inc. 500, 5,000. I've just won an award again, fastest growing company in,
Yeah.
Southern Hamilton, in north of the Cape. I've just won another award. Well, that's fine, but the trouble is that growth doesn't necessarily pay the bills. Cash flow does. So you have to be really, really careful in that scaling, that you are managing the margins. So, for example, the accountants would teach you that variable costs vary with revenue. Well, that's logical. Yeah, I mean, that's why, when I grow, I'll have to spend more money in materials. But fixed costs stay fixed. No, they don't. Fixed costs
Mm.
stay fixed for a period of time, and then that pesky finance person wants another accountant, or that sales manager wants another salesperson.
Our insurance goes through the roof.
Or insurance, exactly, or the rent goes up on the
Yeah.
building. You thought, well, why you?
No,
I'm
you
still,
you you hit it again, because I made that mistake when I was in the
yeah,
martial arts business. We were
right,
very successful with a couple of centers, and the temptation was there to scale, and we went all in. We pushed all the chips in, and then I found that a
right,
couple of the centers were underperforming, so the others had to carry it. And in
right,
the end, I actually did an analysis. I did one of these silly, well, not so
right.
silly,
Great. Yeah,
time measurement analysis, right? Value
right,
for time. And I
right.
found out, because somebody was complaining to me that I was underpaying them, which I wasn't,
Okay.
but 'cause they had unlimited commission, so I was
Shocker.
underpaid. But I
Yeah,
found out that I was making at the time about 91 cents an hour.
right, right, right.
And
Yes,
that's not cool. But I want to speak more to our CU friends, because the
yes,
credit union world is really, we've got to get you at some of these credit union conferences. I think what you're
yeah, yeah.
talking about really, really would resonate with them from the
Sure.
heart. And so we're going
Yeah.
to talk to Alex about that, right? But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
one of the challenges, they're under constant pressure right now to
Right,
merge and to scale. And the
right,
challenge that I'm hearing all the time, particularly when we get them, in the room, just the C-suite folks, and
right,
what they're really concerned about, they're really worried about losing what makes the credit union special, which is a
right.
very intimate human relationship with their members.
Yes,
For people who
yeah,
don't know credit unions, members, they don't
yeah.
have customers, they have members.
Right.
Okay.
They have members. Right, right.
And so that
Yeah.
that's a constant challenge, but I don't think that's unique to the credit unions. That healthcare sees the
No.
same thing. How do you scale and still keep it human? I snuck the brand in there, didn't I?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well done. Keep right on. We all keep it human.
I could be a NASCAR driver now.
I mean, I don't. I'm not, as familiar. I mean, I know of credit unions, but I'm not.
Mm,
But I think the principle is a strong one. That what you're trying to do with certainly any company. At the end of the day, you've got this core set of values that have worked for you,
mm,
and sometimes I think that. I mean, I was part of a public company that tried to keep that small head office, the same small head office in London, as they scaled 3, 4, 5, 6x, 10x,
mhm.
and they did. They managed to do that, and it kept a sort of core sort of feeling to the company that would have been more difficult if we'd spread it out. It was kind of like, oh, we're still in Victoria Street, yeah, and we're worth $1 billion instead of half a billion. Like we're still the same team in Victoria Street, and I think there's a lot of tricks like that. I think there's a lot of, I mean, at the end of the day, large public companies that have grown by acquisition, they're really a set of smaller divisions.
Yeah,
You
right.
think of, what I mean? It's like if you think about, I don't know, certainly at one time Pepsi, which was say 19 billion or something like that, it was
Mhm.
19 brands, $1 billion each. So even you can break everything down. I mean, it could be geographic, it could be by division, but hanging on to those core values. I mean, in Massachusetts, I've spoken to Aaron Ain about this, who used to run Cronus, a big company that merged with a big UK company, and he retired. But he had such a strong culture
Mm.
through his work that, in simplified terms, to keep it human, as it were, he definitely had a more complex system of HR than this. But the basic thing was binary. There was a scale of technical competence and a scale of, kind of, pardon the French, asshole competence. And you could score really high on technical. You can
Yeah.
imagine 9 out of 10 with an accountant or a
Mm-hmm.
coder or a marketing, who knows,
Yeah.
but not so strong on the other scale. Well,
Yeah.
in simple terms, you're not going to get promoted with a low score. In fact, you might not be around for a long term.
Well, that's
And
not a bad thing, is it? I mean,
it's not about, so that
yeah.
culture. I mean, keep it. So I think the key is that with entrepreneurs, I do think there's a tendency to overcomplicate things. And I think if you've got a couple of, like, it's no point in having 25 core values, right?
Mm.
You know, you can never remember
Yeah.
the first 10 of them. But
Yeah.
having a couple of, you're very strong in this, these couple of core values that really mean something to you. I think that we've talked about this as well, that people definitely have pay and rations quite high, but whether it's Dan Pink or anyone else who's written about this in terms of social sciences, it's rarely the number one or number two or number three. There are things ahead of that.
Right.
And as you build an organization, whether it's organically and by acquisition, if you recognize that people, want to get better at what they do, and they want some freedom to within, don't forget about them. Please give me a manager, but give me some freedom. And
Yeah.
and, and by the way, quite like a purpose. So I was speaking to an entrepreneur yesterday. We're talking about maybe going on the acquisition trail, and it's to do with they're a big private company manufacturing, amongst many things, military hats and various helmets
Mm-hmm.
for protection. And you can imagine the purpose of saving someone's life by wearing that helmet. I mean, they've had families thank the product designers for making those helmets as robust as they have. I mean,
Right.
I build helmets. No, you don't. You save lives.
No,
You
I'm
see,
so glad you said that. That's a huge connection. That's one of the questions I ask all the time when I'm speaking.
yeah,
I say, "What do you guys do?" And
yeah,
yeah, sometimes you'll hear technical things like
yeah,
I
yeah.
sell houses or I make helmets. No, 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 no. You're going to think
No,
about this for a while. What
that's
do
right.
you really do? And like you said, this particular company saves people's lives, and it's crucial to look at that. Um,
Yeah.
as valuable as the line item dollar and cents items from your estimation, and
I,
how do you present that
I,
in a
I, I
selling
actually,
context?
yeah, I think there's a consequence. I actually think that, my old boss in Thompson's, he was a genius, and I was young, so I was sponging up every word he said.
Hmm.
And not everyone has that. I worry my daughters are in their 30s. I mean, I worry that they have got access to the kind of mentoring I had in my 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
I do worry about that. I mean, I think they seem very focused, very smart, and they actually have got very, very good people around them. So I'm very, very pleased for them. But when I was and Thompson, my boss, used to say, Ian, at the end of the day, when people are having fun, they can make more money. And
Hmm.
this having fun, not in a clown way, not in a kind of like,
Right.
let's tell more jokes about the
Enjoyment, right? Yeah.
enjoy. Yeah, they enjoy each other. And, I know there's a lot written about, it's part of a family. I do tend to lean on the be careful on that analogy of metaphor of family. It's like,
Yeah.
I think one can have friendships and work together to deliver a cause, but at the end of the day, you know, you're in business to make money, and you're in business to charm and enlighten and improve people's lives, i.e., customers. And there's no doubt about that. But I think that measuring margins is as important, obviously, as measuring happiness. I mean, I think that I've got a very good friend who's been in the CX, the customer experience, the NPS, world forever or ever. And, you know, so often that customer scorecard was never really reaching the C suite. And
Mm.
yet the consequences of that connection being weak were huge.
Yeah.
Like, look, like NPS is a good example. Everyone wants a 9 or a 10. Why? Well, because, well, seven's pretty good. No, it's not. And I'm not
Mm.
praising NPS, Net Promoter Scores, a particular system, but I'm just saying that in that framework, a 7, I mean, a 2 or a 3 people hate you, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
really got a problem with 2s and 3s or 1s. I mean,
Well,
you've got to
except we
be,
can all be there on any given day. That's
well,
the thing too. Yeah,
yeah, you
yeah,
just hope they don't know where you live. I mean, but
yeah.
the 6s and 7s, they are not. They are silently unhappy, and
Hmm.
they are probably going to you're going to lose that revenue. So if you could say to the CFO, "Hey, there's 4 million at risk here in terms of the revenue," I'm like, okay, I've now got like I've just dropped
Hmm.
everything in my desk. Now I'm listening
Yeah,
to what you're saying. So I think I think that the key is that the human side and the organizational side, I think they have to be symbiotic, and so often they're not. There's a
yeah.
disconnect, right?
No, well, you just hit a key point. Like there are so many
Yeah,
situations. We definitely, this comes up in workshops all the time, where if
right.
there's not that culture of true trust that we're always talking about, then
Yeah,
a problem like that. I mean, that was a big
right.
one you just described.
Yes,
It may have started off very small, right?
right,
And people just
right.
didn't feel comfortable. They didn't want to rock. They didn't want to get yelled at.
Yeah,
Right? They didn't want to
exactly.
get fingers waved in their faces. So they
Right.
don't trust enough to bring those issues to you, right? When they're
That's right.
smaller, and then when they're big, oh my God, then you end up with that, a state of war sometimes in an organization, right?
Yeah,
People pointing fingers, blaming each other, figuring, and then yeah,
yeah. There's so
catastrophe.
much noise like that in companies that whether it's 10 million revenue or
Hmm.
a billion revenue or bigger, it's so clear to me that there is a way of being tough love with people to
Yeah.
make them better. And they feel you never in public, private sort of, like mentoring. I mean, I've been quite tough with people over the years. Some people would say too tough, but I've been tough, but they've taken it because they know I'm coming at it from a very, very good place.
Oh,
Like
they know you care. I mean, that's the thing. One of
I
the
care
one of the key
exactly.
strategies we're always preaching is tough yet compassionate. And when I say that, people say, "Well, why did you put the word tough first?" I
Yeah,
said, "Because you have to be tough to be
yeah,
truly compassionate.
yeah.
Because otherwise, you're just going to be, you're
Right.
just going to be wishy-washy,
Well,
and people will see
exactly.
through that and they won't respect you,
They
and
won't.
you'll coddle the weak folks. You won't have the strength to confront the weaker members of your team for
Right.
whatever reason. That might be performance, it might be behavior, but
Yeah,
anyway,
and
yeah.
and you're not doing them any favors, by the
No,
way.
no, no, no. You're doing a lot of damage, right?
Not doing anyone any favors. When I got into investment banking the first time,
Hmm.
very very time in a long long time ago, it was a one man band, but he was brilliant. He was a brilliant brilliant investment banker, brilliant
Hmm.
public speaker, and he was fine. He was happy. He was part of a practice that had some, a big accounting practice had some shares in him. So he had a building. He had people to go to, but he was basically on his own with one PA, that's he loved that, but he hadn't built anything. And when I came along, I was young and I wanted to get into investment banking. So the happy ending was we built a nice investment bank together, like 20 people, 25 people. But he was tough. I mean,
Mm.
he was bordering on being rude, but it was always I always could see the bigger goal.
Yeah.
I think he taught me to be a better boss than he was to me, but he was good at the right things, and he was the most generous man as well. It was a strange kind of like, in the end, it was a great result for me. It's just not for everyone. I mean,
Right.
but
Right.
you can
Right. Right.
dial it back a little bit. You don't have to be that. You can dial it back. I mean, I know there are some sales managers that people say I wish they were a wee bit more humane about it all, and I get that. So this is not easy stuff. It's saying,
No.
oh well, I
No,
was tough.
and it's very individual. Like I said,
Yeah, yeah,
I hate to overuse this word is overused, authentic, but in its truest application, if
yes,
you're not authentic, right, then
right.
they're going to respect you more. And like you said, sometimes we've all had people in our lives that are a little to any of us because it's a continuum, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
We all
yeah,
fall
yeah.
differently on the scale, but I think we've all had
Right.
people in our lives who were a little rough around the edges from our perspective that were
Yeah,
truly, truly remarkable leaders. And like you said, sometimes behind that, I don't even want to say it's a veneer because if that's how somebody is, that's how they are. But
yeah.
somehow hiding behind that tough exterior is sometimes the most generous, kind, caring
Right.
person. And so it's not right to dismiss them just on what the socially acceptable protocol is at any given time because we've just lived through several years where that socially accepted protocol went way
Right.
too far, right,
Exactly.
and caused a
Well,
lot of damage. Yeah.
Well, the other way to look at it is that we talk about so there's a situation where one is perhaps a disciplinary type situation,
Hmm.
maybe it'd be a praising situation where they're really doing well. I mean, it could be also, but the reality is that situation didn't arrive out of a vacuum, out of
Yeah.
midair. It arrived as a consequence of a set of events.
Hmm.
So, for example, people talk a lot about and still do job specifications, and I say, yeah, that's fine. But what about calling it a performance profile instead? So
Mm.
what's the well, a performance profile takes the jugular of the job specification because you want to be clear, but it gives a very clear indication to the recipient of the performance levels expected. And it can be three or four, and say, well, that's for salespeople. No, no, you can have an HR manager with performance expectations. You can have an AI, whatever, sort of developer of agentic systems, performance profile. In other words, if you don't have that, there's a danger you're going to get to a place where they go, well, I didn't know that was like a level you wanted me to get to. I
Oh
don't know
man,
what's
if I had $1 for every time I've heard that in a workshop.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
well, why didn't you must have known. Well, why would I have known? Well, I've spelt. Well, I must have told you. It's like they go
No,
to
no,
look
you know what? And I'm going to say this in the kindest way I can.
right,
And because I could easily be on the other end of this, I can see
right,
myself telling me the same thing. But
right.
we
Yes.
we've got to assume that people are a bit ignorant. I mean, because we all are. We can all be a little bit obtuse. We can all be ignorant, and it's
Oh,
not
absolutely.
necessarily anything nefarious. It's just that we're all
Right.
wrapped up in what we have to be concerned with every day. And let's face it, I have to be concerned about me. You have to be concerned about you.
Yeah.
It takes some
Sure.
effort to step outside that, and when we're working on a team, that's necessary. It's part of our skill set, but
No,
it's well, it should be. But yeah, it's
well,
important. So as leaders, I think it's important that we help.
I,
We don't always have
yeah,
to set them. That's the thing I'll push back on. Some people, the leader has to set these, like you said, the parameters for a performance,
right.
right? But no, I mean, you could do that collaboratively, you can do that cooperatively, and you can
Oh,
allow
yes.
that to be living, a living, growing document, right? That grows
Yeah.
as the needs change. Yeah.
Well, the performance profiles, certainly that I've put together with
Profile.
people.
That's the word you're using. Yeah, I love that
Profile,
performance profile.
performance profile. It's definitely been. In fact, I did it recently in the education related sector where
Hmm.
there wasn't really that many job specs. So instead of just trying to do more job specs,
Yeah.
we revamped it into performance profiles. But it was a discussion document. I mean, it was very much this
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Yeah.
we were expecting. You get somebody say in customer support, might say who knows their games to say, look, Ian, it's not really realistic that I say, okay, that's fair. What would be more? Well, I mean, I know you want to stretch me, but I think this metric would be a fairer
Yeah.
metric. Okay, I'll live with that. In other words, you got to be seen to be. I mean, why wouldn't I? Now, it depends on the personalities. You can imagine. You mentioned that dialogue with the salesman. I think that quote is a wee bit on the high side, Jim. I think you should be. I think you should be 50% less than that. Yes,
Yeah.
no, noted. Now off you go.
Right. Exactly. That's where the tough love comes back in. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so obviously, I would say debate it, but anyway, but I
No,
actually
but
think there's
most of the time, don't you find most of the time people aren't? I don't know.
right,
Call me Pollyannish, but in my experience, when you have a clear conversation like that,
right.
people usually aren't trying to get out of work. They're not generally lazy. I mean, if that's the
No,
case, then yeah,
no,
then the solution is simple. Just you're going to
yeah,
part ways. But I think most of the time, people are going to. I've found that if I give people the benefit of the doubt, they actually choose to work harder than I was going to require them to work.
oh, 1,000%. I think there was a time in certainly my career where there was definitely some lazy genes around the place. There was definitely people who, and obviously there are
There
always
is with
people
every yeah with all people. I mean, of course, the
who like
current
kidding. I'm not trying.
disengagement figures bear
Yeah,
that out. But
but I think there's less places to hide for these
mhm.
people now. I mean, I think that, and certainly the obviously the most recent phenomenon, which has got a long, long way to play out. Obviously, the AI side of things.
Mm,
I mean, I'm using AI daily in certainly the acquisition process, but it
mhm.
really certainly I'm using it at this first stage as a super catalyst for my work.
Right.
It's actually making my work. quicker and more efficient, as long as there's a human in the loop. In other words,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
looking at the results and going, yeah, not quite right there. And there's a few people being saying that, journalists saying that recently, that it's that you know, it's actually amazing to be an experienced exec with AI coming along, funny enough, because we have got the reasonableness check in our brain that a younger exec doesn't have that reasonableness
Hmm.
check. So I do worry that they are believing the AI output in a way that we wouldn't, because we're like, yeah,
Right, accepting it without any skepticism and without
yeah.
sort of fact checking it, right? Yeah.
That's right. That editor's
Yeah.
view. No, it's not easy, but I think, there was something came out the other day there, and the AI agent was telling me it was actually more about the clear next steps. Now, the analysis was strong, the clear next
Hmm.
steps were crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
never have done those next steps. I'm like, no, that's not how you do it. Now,
Yeah.
the analysis wasn't very helpful. The analysis to make better decisions is excellent. It really is. Frankly, when you do analysis as a human being, you go and try and do your analysis, you go and look places. It's quite tiring work. You're like,
And you can only do so much in so much time, right? That's the, yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
on the acquisition side, you've got this
Hmm.
you've got this time pressure, and
Hmm.
so it's been a massive fill up to
Yeah.
many parts of that acquisition process. But I understand entrepreneurs who are wondering at the moment about all these things and how AI fits in, and I would say you've got plenty of time, plenty of
Oh, yeah,
time.
well, I'm glad you said that because it
Don't
seems
rush
like people are putting the brakes on a little bit more now. First of all, we realize that AI can be pretty dumb, like
it.
what you just said, right? And it's funny because I was having an argument with somebody over this, and they were saying, well, the AI lie. I said, well, not really. I've talked to some of the AI pioneers.
Yeah,
It's not that it's lying. It's designed to try to please you. I said that's one of the things that
right,
one of the bugs they're trying to work out now, right? But it's
right,
just the way it is, and it was designed to try to help you. And let's be honest, from a commercial point of view, all these companies are competing, so
right.
they're trying to design systems that we want to be more engaged with and spend more time
Yeah,
with. So generally, we'd rather hear it tell us how great we are than how much we suck, right?
yeah,
Although I've got mine trained the other direction now, it tells me when I
yeah.
suck.
Yes,
So yeah, I think that
right,
fear of being left out is kind
right,
of of passing a little bit. But I'm really more interested in the leaders who are saying, look, this is a powerful tool. It's growing more powerful every day.
yeah.
Everything we just said could be outdated by the time this airs next week.
That's
The
right.
killer robots could be here. We don't know because the pioneers have told me that the biggest surprise they've had is the rate of acceleration. So I think we
Yes.
need to brace for that as leaders. But also, it's up to us, damn it. We're the ones who decide how we use this stuff. And I think that's what people lost sight of. They just were so in fear of being left behind, right?
From,
That they were grabbing every implementation they could, and that's certainly not a good
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely. Entrepreneurs are very much still in control. At the end of the day, if so, I've got a simple.
So far,
I just say, yeah,
that's the disclaimer. As of the date of this conversation, right? Yeah.
this is being recorded on May the. I sometimes even read blog posts or something I've written, and I'm like, I'm not so sure I believe that anymore. There's Malcolm Gladwell just did his revision of the tipping point, the revenge of the
Right.
tipping point,
Right.
and I love the tipping point. Everyone did. It was a great book, and
Hmm.
I'm just nearly finished it was 2024. The revenge came out, and it's some new case studies, but he it makes you really think about why something happens. Like, do you understand the kind of you've got so many judgments and biases.
Hmm.
Have really stood back and looked at things? I love somebody who does that. It's like counterintuitive, and I think that in business we need to steel ourselves a little bit from making things too complicated. And I like, Malcolm Gladwell will look at something and he'll look for the pattern of why it tipped. Why did what? And he looked at COVID again. It was quite interesting the analysis he did within the COVID sort of phenomenon, And there were some surprising conclusions in the book. I'm on no commission, but I would recommend reading the book. But I would say that in my world, I've boiled it down to three columns for entrepreneurs. I think there are three vital columns that every problem falls into, sometimes all three, and that is strategy. I mean, there's no question that whether AI or not, being very clear on your positioning in your company's positioning. Seth Godin said a version of Seth Godin, who's a great marketeer, said, "You're either invisible or you're remarkable." And I think there's an element of truth in that in private companies. People think there's a big spectrum. I don't think there's that. I think there's companies that really are remarkable in their space. They've found a superpower, maybe not unique, but remarkable. And there's a lot of Me Too's that are getting by. And I think that strategy is so. The positioning playbook is a country mile above everything else. Like if you define who you are and what you are, I think then it makes execution, the middle column, so much easier because you're really confident of what you are and who you are.
Yeah.
There's a lot within execution. But then people get confused what I would call governance. So governance is a third column. It's not in the middle of execution. So, well, what do you mean, Ian? Well, sales team. Okay, it's execution. Sure, you go out there, you build a great sales team, a great sales process, great. What's the governance part? The governance part is the sales commission. It's not execution. First of all, you're defining roles and expectations and reward systems.
So this is actually the management part. If we're dividing leadership and management, now you're talking about the management side of things.
Exactly, and they're symbiotic. So
right.
I'm failing because of execution. Well, are you? Let's examine that. I've looked at 1,000 sales commission structures. That is an unusual one. Oh, you think? Yeah, I've never seen. Why did you think that would motivate the sales team? So the problem isn't even the sales process; it's your commission structure. I simplified to make the point, right? So that's a governance point. Or your customer support person has got a sales target. No wonder they're confused. So your roles are woolly and weak.
Yeah.
Or the production director doesn't know why the quality manager is on the same level as him. The quality manager needs to report to the production director. Like, why have you split those? Like, it could be a role, governance issue. So the rubber hits the road, and the product's not selling as well. Well, maybe it's the strategic product roadmap problem. So underneath strategy, you've got product strategy, you've got people strategy, and you've got all sorts of strategy underneath the big strategy. So I think that Malcolm Gladwell running something to ground of why it happened, like, are we actually seeing why this happened? And I think in entrepreneurs, I think they get good instinctively as they grow their business, but there comes a point of scale where they really have to back up and have a more formal structure so that lesser beings can do
That's
it.
That's why I'm not going to scale. By the way, I've recognized my weakness. If I was going to scale, I would have to hire you or somebody like you to just come in and say, now you do that part, right? Yeah, but it's interesting you mentioned Seth Godin again, because Seth Godin in a recent interview, he raised that question that I asked you earlier. He said, you really have, especially in this day and age, because we'll be able to do more with fewer people, or amplify the power of the people we have with the technology. So the question was, should you scale, and what are you going to lose by that? Or are you doing, like, you mentioned the superpowers, right? Are you employing your superpowers the best? And, I love what you said about being the best, or declaring the best. We went through that. I'm thinking back to the martial arts schools. We had a business meeting one time with the center directors, and I was telling those guys, you guys are the best. You guys are the best around here. You provide the best service. You provide the most, personal service. Right. And one of the guys said, well, I can't go around saying I'm the best. I said, because there's other good guys around here. I said, I know, they're my friends too. And I said, I don't even consider them competitors, really. But I'm just saying you guys are the best. They're probably saying the same thing. If we're all doing that, everything's going to work out fine. It's not about killing each other. It's about each of us being our best, right?
Yeah, and some people say, you learn more looking at your customers, and some say you learn more looking at your competitors, and everyone's got a school of thought. I
Yeah.
see both,
Something from
obviously.
both, right? Yeah.
I mean, really do. I mean, and certainly there's a lot of logic that doesn't work in business sometimes. Like
Hmm.
go and speak to your customers; they'll tell you what to build next. That could be a horrible idea. I've run software
Yeah,
companies.
no, yes. Oh man, you just hit it right out of the park because I was just going to
Yeah,
say
yeah,
too that was Jimmy Young, who was your Dr. Young from Boston. There, his
yes,
son became the Secretary of Commerce in Virginia, and he and I
right,
spoke at the same event, and was
right,
a martial arts event, ironically,
uh
and
huh,
he insulted these guys by saying martial arts had become commoditized, and
right,
he had made his point. It was well received, and then afterwards, when I followed him, and I said he's right. I said
yeah,
he's right. There's nothing special about if you listen to always to. I'm going to reframe it now because if we listen
right,
always to what our customers wanted at the time or what they were
right,
telling us that they wanted, we know what they wanted and what they were telling us was actually two different things.
yeah,
They wanted a cheap place to put their kids for an hour after school.
right,
And the cheapest was the, and I said, no, that's not what they want. They want a life changing experience for their kids. They want these other things now because it's become commoditized. And that's why I'm kind of tying this back to scaling again because it
yes,
became so readily available and people started to compete on price, which is what a lot of
right,
customers were saying. That was
yes,
really degrading the
right,
entire product, if you want to call it that,
right,
system industry wide, right? And that's
yeah,
why martial arts became so commercialized. When people say, "Why
right,
did it become so commercialized?" Because that's what the people wanted, or that's
that's
what they
right,
said they wanted. You got
yeah,
exactly what you wanted. So anyway, I
yeah.
hope that didn't go off too far on a tangent, but it seems
No,
to
no, no, but
reinforce what you're saying.
it's all underneath this like the difficulties of scaling, and I think you
Hmm.
can break it down. I mean, within that strategy, execution and governance. So even within strategy, you've got
Hmm.
all your various sales and marketing and production and all the rest of it. But again, it's interesting when you pull back the covers. Even taking sort of sales as an individual sort of
Hmm.
skill set. Again, it's amazing that we haven't as a generality, there's a danger that people still regard sales is to do with selling stuff when
Oh,
it's
oh yeah, yeah.
nothing to do with selling stuff. Like,
Fastest way to turn people off now, most of the
it,
time.
it was always about questioning to
Hmm.
understand how you improve that particular prospect's life.
Hmm.
And I mean Bill, the prospect. I don't mean IBM. I mean the actual quality manager, Bill, who you think you've got a product to
Right.
solve some of his problems or enhance his life. Again, to get to that, and this is very similar. There's a lot of similarities between a good practiced acquirer in an M&A process and a good sales professional because both are very, very good at doing something special, asking the right questions.
Mm.
You know, the asking, and it was a great where True Detective, where Foster was playing the lead role, and she that was the great line she came out with that they had written, and they said, "No, we're just." We've no idea who did this. Like it was the middle of Alaska or something, Iceland or something. I don't know. It was like cold,
Mm.
and she turned to the number two and she said, "Now you're asking the wrong questions." And it's so true. Like you'll
Yeah.
never solve anything by asking the wrong questions. And so
Yeah.
salespeople to do it, that's a salesman. But I'm on the acquisition trail, and I need to be very careful what questions I ask because I need to extract enough information to perceive the value of this company.
Right,
So
right. And they can't, right? It's interesting because you want to get information, but if your
yeah,
questions are perceived as leading or
right,
manipulative, then you've
right.
lost it too, right? They have to be sincere questions that
Oh,
are getting both parties to the right place. But
I
yeah,
go the other way.
but you again, you hit it out of the park because one of the things we preach all the time is leaders are not the people that have all the answers, and I'm not talking about leaders in
Right,
managerial hierarchy. I don't care if you're a
right,
frontline salesperson. I don't care if you're sweeping the floors, and I say that with
right.
pride because I did that plenty. But
Sure.
right, but
Right,
leadership is that quality of you know being able to influence the people around you, being able to
right,
inspire and empower the people around you. And
right.
when you're in sales in particular, what are you doing? Well, if you're a competent salesperson, if you're a success, and all the best ones, all the best salespeople I've ever met are like, fill this bill. They
Yes.
inspire people. They touch their hearts, not just their heads. They empower them. They give them tools, right? They give them something that they need, and they
Yeah.
guide them through the process. right? With hopefully with warmth and sincerity.
But the
So
other thing is they're really good at getting off the stage if they can't help.
yeah,
They start
exactly, right. Yeah, sometimes. Well, Stephen
to
Covey
remember that
famously
stuff.
said, "Win-win or no deal," right? And that's a powerful. That's not an awful thing to say. That's a powerful thing to say. Walk
I,
away.
well, it's so real and so truthful
Hmm.
and so you do it that you and of course if you get, the bonus point come if you can say, well, I can't help you, but hey, I know somebody who can help you. At least it'd
Yeah.
be worth a Zoom call or a coffee with them.
Hmm.
That is gold dust. Now, is there a possibility that you'll be able to help them on something else at a later date? Sure, there is,
Hmm.
but don't waste their time because I think really, I mean, chip stakes in knowing your product as a salesman. Like, if you don't know your product, what the hell are you even playing for? But the more advanced thinking is that you really are, and is this where AI can help the prep, but can't help the result, which is the relationship building. So I
Hmm.
think as an example of where AI can fit in to any business cycle, certainly it can help. There's no excuse for not being super prepared. I
Yeah.
mean, none at all. I mean, I had a prospect meeting yesterday on the acquisition side of things. He said a couple of things that we were looking at in terms of sectors and
Hmm.
petro, it was to do with injection molding and one or two other, manufacturing type areas. I I had used my AI engine, prompted it the right way. I wasn't going to give him all the names, obviously, it was a prospect meeting, but I was able to highlight 5 or 6 companies. In fact, there was 3,915 companies that fit into there. Now, he's like, how the hell did you know this?
Yeah.
And this was just northeast of the US. It was a very
Oh,
so, like that made that conversation. Well, it was meant to be a 45-minute intro. I had to
mhm.
get him off the phone after 1 hour, 20 minutes.
And again, too, that's so cool, that story, because now, if one of the signs, geez, I'm going to go on a rant here, but I get
Sure, go
deluged
for it.
with these LinkedIn things, like I see somebody, I admit I don't check very carefully when someone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn. I take a quick look. And sometimes I hold my breath and say, oh, I'll give him a chance, but I know what's coming. And then you get that generic pitch.
Yeah.
One that I got the other day was, well, I'll tell you two,
Uh-huh.
because the first one that came in this week was, have you ever considered charging a fee for speaking? Gee, I think I have considered that. and then the other one was, have you ever thought about transforming your expertise into a book? And I wanted to be nasty. I wanted to just send them my Amazon page and say, look, the least you can do is the
Oh,
least you can do. And
that's
when
right.
you're talking about what you just did, I think that's brilliant, because as we move into this AI age, and people
Yeah,
know that it takes very little time. I'm not
yeah,
talking about effort, because effort's a different thing.
that's
Takes
right.
Because for you, I think you're the same way I am. Probably that
Yes,
list got you very curious, and you're probably going to go there and learn more about those other companies and that
sure,
process and all, right?
of course.
And
Yeah,
that's all
yeah,
cool. It opens our heads
yeah,
to more things. But
sure.
people know that it doesn't take much time for you to do a little bit of work, a little bit of background. And so when
And
you don't do that, you're just
and
marking yourself as a dub.
they don't really care how long it took. It's the thought that
The thought,
counts.
yes, the effort that you made.
The
At
thought that
least look at my LinkedIn profile, for Christ's sake.
show me some respect. Like,
Yeah.
I find that, yeah, I mean, in a very focused way, I'm
Hmm.
coaching and helping people on both getting ready for sale and on the acquisition trail. But you think about the first appearance as an acquirer, and I'm meeting the seller. That is a Super Bowl event. That is a
Mm.
big, unreasonably important event. You will have many dances with the seller
Right.
if they want to do that. But that first event is it's just underwhelming for most sellers. It's like,
Hmm.
really? It's not probably as bad as, I've got a great idea, Jim. You could do a book. That would be that's bordering on offensive. But it's what? But I do think that there is that you've had a runway. The seller's not up for sale, so it's a sweetheart cold call kind of
Mhm.
introduction. But you've had the runway. I mean, some of the best speeches you've heard on TED Talks, etc. I remember one woman, she had a brilliant speech, 25 minutes, whatever it was, and they asked her, "So, how long did it take to prepare for this speech?" And you can imagine the answer. They were expecting weeks, and she said, "About 2 years." She said, "No, no, no, I'm not being funny. It was 2 years because I've done the pub
Mhm.
circuit, as it were. I've done the small
Yeah.
events. I've
Yeah.
done all that, but also the words. I've rehearsed those words and tried those words out over the last 18 months, and
Mhm.
this was the culmination really of it coming together. So you've no idea
Oh well,
how
not
you
only
prep.
not only that. I mean, like you're talking about, you arrange a first meeting with somebody that you're going to talk about either a sale or an acquisition, right? And the work
Right,
that you put in behind it. Um,
right,
you know, I I'd rather talk about you than me, but real quick to share my own experience just for the
yeah,
perspective. I remember being challenged by somebody about rates one time for speaking,
right,
and
right.
the thing was, well, geez, you got paid that much for an hour? I think at the time I had just passed 10,000 or something. I said, "You get $10,000 for an hour?" I said,
Yes,
"No, that you're paying
no,
for the
no.
45 years of misery, heartache, and
That's
mistakes
right.
that I made."
Well,
I said, "That's what it is." And in your work, you're bringing exactly that to the table. It's
yeah.
not it's
Oh,
not the little bit of prep, and I'm not discounting it,
no, no,
but
no, no, sure.
even if you took a month to prepare for that meeting,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
small in comparison with the years and years of experience that you have, right?
yeah, yeah.
The triumph
Sure.
you've had and the mistakes that you've had that all are part of your domain knowledge, that right.
Well,
And too many people, there's the other danger, too many people now, and
yeah.
there's cycles of this has happened before, but
Right,
now
right,
it's
right, right.
AI is the catalyst that
Right.
you can learn a little bit about a lot of stuff really quickly. Information
Yeah.
is cheaper than it's ever been, right?
Oh, indeed,
But to be
indeed.
able to apply that, interpret that information, to bring the wisdom and the awareness to it, that's a whole. You cannot substitute the experiences that you have.
Well, and I think also to that point about pricing and being commoditized and that sort of thing. I mean,
Mm.
what AI is bringing to the party as well is, and this will be a real test for lawyers, I think. Amongst
Right?
they'll have to learn how to sell value pretty quickly because
Yeah.
I mean, with the little black, the cloak going to be pulled, the curtain's going to be pulled back,
Hmm.
and the hours they're putting in, you know, uh, you could definitely turn those hours down a notch by applying a review period to the AI answer. Now, clearly, many law practices are embedding AI, and they've got massive guardrails. Some haven't got the guardrails in place they should have, and therefore you're seeing court
Right.
appearances like. So we don't recognise that case study you're citing. No, well, I certainly didn't make it up, or maybe I did make it
Yeah.
up.
If AI is telling you to use that sovereign citizen angle, no, it's just telling you what you wanted to hear. Don't do it.
Plane crash in China. No, there wasn't. Well, there might have been. No, there wasn't. So,
Right.
but going back to that point of preparation, I mean, one very specific thing again, C-suite, if they're senior people listening in,
Mhm.
one of the big flaws people get wrong is on that acquisition thing is this integration thinking, like they're thinking about how they'll run the business way too late in the process. It's just a
Yeah.
little vignette of a problem. You say, well, what do you mean? Well, again, you're meeting the seller for the first time. The seller is in his or her rights to say, hey, Ian, just I know we've talked about the business generally, and you've been kind and shared details about your own business as an acquirer, which I found very helpful. So just ballpark for me, how would you run the business in your group? Now
Hmm.
the answer isn't Jim will answer that, or um, I haven't a bloody clue. But I'm going to think about it. Bad answer. So you have to be able to have said, we have given it some thought. You dominate New England. We're on the edges of it. We're big in Chicago. We're big on the West Coast.
Hmm.
So here's how we see it. Now we need to talk it through with you, and you're going to help shape that. But here's our initial thinking. Great answer. That's more like it. You've given it some thought. You've looked into my business. You've looked into your own business. Or it might be even more extreme. It might be a UK acquisition. You say, we're not in Europe. you're our platform to Europe. Another good answer. The fact is, that is something that should be part of your filtering of targets, the ease of integration. People are still doing it in due diligence. Oh, how will we actually run this business? I
I
suppose we
like
better
I
check.
like what you just said there, the question is that, man, it's so
Yeah,
tempting, and it's getting even more tempting. Again, here's where not just AI, but technology in general over the last few years
yeah,
has caused this phenomena that it's easier to take a shotgun approach now. And in some cases, you can also blow a lot of money doing this, but in some cases, it's a
right.
little more economical too. Right? So,
Mm-hmm.
how important that filtering process, it seems like, is critical, but
Yeah,
not just if you're doing a multi-million-dollar deal. It's also
right.
critical for
Yeah.
any of us, right?
Yeah, well, and what you're doing with a filtering process and having a process, you're forcing the alignment back to why you're doing it in the first place. So you're constantly saying,
So
does
it's
this
more
actually?
personal there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you had an original. I mean, it could be a recruitment project.
Hmm.
It could be an ERP system you're buying. It could be an acquisition target. But you had a strategy. And how often are we going back and confirming, does that actually align with why we're doing this? Because if you let it go too far down the line, that comparison is too late. It's like almost, oh well, maybe, well, you start compromising, put it that way, and
Yeah.
it's good enough. And in fact, it's not good
Oh, yeah,
enough.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, so like it's not really an HVAC supplier. 10% of its revenue is HVAC. It's something else, but you're kind of ignoring that fact. So
Mm.
I think that whether it's an acquisition type model or whether you are developing a new product suite, are you staying in your lane? Like, are you staying loyal to your DNA? And often I see entrepreneurs straying out of their lane, and instead of being world class at everything, they're not world class at products C, D, and E. I mean, they've
Yeah.
been better reinvesting in their A's and B's. Like they've
There's the
gone,
Apple story in a nutshell, right? Or the
yeah,
Apple
they've
story.
gone
Yeah.
deep. Exactly. So there's all sorts of. So I guess that positioning and execution and strategy and governance stuff. I think that what AI is able to do is access so much more data to make better decisions, but it still comes down to you will never have all the facts. That's the reality. You will never have all the facts to make those decisions, especially as they come at you from a daily basis. But you can definitely embed AI into some of your processes to make decisions better. Whether you go the full hog, as it were, and now we're moving into things like employees being AI, agentic
You
AI,
know,
where
yeah.
that's another level. And it's happening. I mean there are employees that are AI agents. I mean, that's what they are,
Right.
but they've got a job title, or they've got a
Oh,
performance.
I use Marbleism, and that they set it
Yeah,
up that way because it just
right,
makes it
right.
easier for us to
Yeah,
interact, right?
yeah,
But you
yeah,
know
yeah.
what? I want to be respectful of your time too.
Sure,
I've got a list of 10 more things we got to cover in future conversations. But
sure, sure.
there's something that's been bugging me for a while that I wanted your perspective on,
Yes, yes,
and I think it's very valuable. Based on especially based on what you just said, there's
yes.
times when I'll go to talk with a company, or start working with a company, and
Mhm.
they'll push back a little bit on like more tangible metrics than some of the human centric stuff we can talk about,
Right,
which can be measured, by the way. It's a lot more expensive and a lot harder to
yeah,
do. But
right.
but at any rate,
Hmm.
sometimes somebody will say, well, why don't you think our particular culture is working? Why do you think command and control doesn't work as well anymore?
Right.
We're successful, we're profitable. And of course,
Yeah,
you're dealing, I'm sure, with companies all the time that have that mindset, whether they're buying or selling. We're profitable. Well, the
yes.
metric I go to usually is I say, show me your churn rate. I want to see how long people are staying here. Am I way off base, or is that a reliable metric that says, if something's not drastically wrong, there's something else that needs to be looked into? How sustainable is this? Because to me, if you're not keeping your people,
Yeah. I mean,
you're on life support, and unfortunately, it can take a couple generations. Well, you're a UK guy, so you could take 100 years for a company to die, right?
Well,
Now it's dying the whole time.
yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, churn rate I mean, you could be in a very narrow sector where there aren't many opportunities and people just can't leave because there aren't
yeah. You have to
enough.
compare it to the other. You
So
have to
you've
comp it,
got
right?
that.
Yeah,
It's all in context. Is it an
yeah.
important measurement no matter what sector you're in? Of course, it has to be an important measure. I think as well, the investment that's needed, whatever structure, command and control, or more disparate kind of structure you're operating, I think that I still see a lack of investment in detailed exit interviews. Like really understanding why someone is moving on. And I think we get a lot of glib answers that don't feel real to me. Like, yeah, well, you weren't paying enough. Really? That was the real reason? Or
Yeah.
getting behind the reasons. And that can sometimes, you can develop a pattern of interesting data there where there's maybe an issue in a department, of course. And that's the other thing, of course, as you well
Mhm.
know, that there's cultures. You'd like to think we have a great culture across every single department, every single area. Often there is a department that is not such a good culture. It could be any space. It could be just and recognizing that's important. And so trying to measure not just a global or corporate culture, but a departmental culture. Sometimes you can have somebody who's achieving results, and underneath that there's an unhappiness, but you
Yeah.
don't really see it. But I think one important point I haven't mentioned yet that I'm beginning to think more and more about with dashboards and way people run businesses. I do think that we are so busy these days that I think it's more important than ever to have what I call triggers that are automatically going to trigger when something happens and alert that person who's accountable for that trigger. Now, triggers could be an order book, a bucket of orders that is draining like a leaky five-hole bucket coming out because the new sales going in are a lot less than the invoicing going out, so that you're
Right.
burning through that order book and you're not topping it up. And there can be triggers around that, book to bill or some other, production type ratio. And I think there are triggers throughout an organization that we need to elevate. They're meant to be key PIs, key
Hmm.
being the important word, not PIs. You can have lots of performance indicators, but the key ones should be spread across a company and should literally flash when they get triggered. Because I think we get locked into board meetings or ops meetings or other meetings, and it's like the triggers are there, but they're kind of like camouflaged, and
Hmm.
a number of times I've looked over the shoulder of a sales manager and I say, you can, Frank, you can see what I can see here. Frank's like, yeah, all looks good to me. I'm like,
Yeah, but you know what? It's funny. Before we wrap up,
yeah,
I
yeah,
want to say this is because in
yeah,
getting to know you more and more, it's I'm glad it's way too long when we hadn't talked,
yeah.
but
Let it go. I'll let it
to
go.
me, a lot of the reason you're able to interpret this, and you've got a special gift
Mhm.
where you can look at numbers and you're seeing beyond those numbers to the
Mhm.
people, because all those numbers are is a product of the effort, the work, and the
That's right.
dedication of the people that create them, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. The
That's right.
numbers aren't anything without the numbers are some way for us to understand what our people are doing, but
Well,
they're only the first one, right? And they're great, but you see beyond that. I wanted to make sure that I had,
and I,
had
I
said that.
think I think it's a lesson for not just junior finance people, but managers of all sort. They need to get better at storytelling,
Mm.
right? So
Hmm.
so so I could get a sixth grader to give me a trial balance with a balance sheet and a profit and loss account. Give me an hour and I'll teach them how to do that. I mean, they might
Hmm.
not totally understand the total nuances of currency and double entry, but I'll give them enough so they'll give me the numbers.
Hmm.
I know that. I know what the bloody numbers are. Tell me why.
Yeah.
Tell me why, and tell me what I can do in the future so those numbers don't happen again. And
Hmm.
it's that why in the storytelling that we lack, and we need to train that. We need to get people really thinking that way, like they have to
Yeah.
explain themselves, and that would be a massive. difference.
And not just ask AI to do that for you.
No,
You're missing
no,
the whole point, right? If you do
no, no,
that.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure that'll get it right either. No, that
Yeah.
would be my. And the other thing I would just close with, just on the big value exits where we started the conversation. I thought about this for a little while, and I love being able to boil it down to 7 or 8 words to simplify things. You know me, I love a good phrase, and really it's to one point I would say to every entrepreneur, just remember this: value isn't created at exit; it's exposed. If you just let that sit in your head for a minute, you realize that it's too late. The bankers and the accountants can't make your company pretty. They can make sure the tax is minimized, but you're the one that has to actually polish the diamond. And if you don't polish it, it's a piece of coal.
Mm.
So you need to think about that. You need to think about values exposed, not created. And you can create it, don't get me wrong, and accelerate the value. That's the key. So whether you sell it or not. So that's I just want to those are the things I'm trying to get across to entrepreneurs, because I can only work with a handful at a time. So there's 6.2 million entrepreneurs running a payroll, so I can't get to all of those. So it's
Well,
only through you I can get.
we're gonna try to help you do that.
Exactly. And that's what my mission is, to try and,
Yeah.
and if it works, fantastic. But I'm a big sharer. I'm a big sharer in LinkedIn. My website is a big sharer. I'm just a big fan of sharing. People, oh, you're giving things away. And come on, come on. It doesn't work like that.